This video is about the new James Bond game for people who either know nothing about the game or want to refresh their memory before its release, and discuss the game itself with like-minded people in the comments under this video. And the first thing I want to say, I absolutely love Hitman. And many of you probably already know exactly where I'm going with that. IO Interactive, the studio behind the Hitman series, is currently launching a new James Bond game. And this is probably one of those rare cases where the developer choice feels so blindingly obvious that it's almost hard to believe it actually happened. Because long before the official announcement, when people were just throwing around ideas about who could pull off a great Bond game, IO Interactive came up every single time without exception. And honestly, it makes perfect sense. Agent 47 is built around everything that makes for a great 007 game. Espionage, going undercover, gadgetry, improvisation, charisma, social stealth, the ability to think your way out of a situation just as much as shoot your own way out, and of course, style. The modern Hitman reboot absolutely drips with style. Eventually the stars aligned, IO Interactive partnered with Amazon and they started building their own take on James Bond. A completely original story about a young Bond just beginning his path to becoming Agent 007. Very soon we'll finally get to see for ourselves what this game is all about. In this video we'll break down everything we know about 007 First Light, what the game looks like, how much Hitman DNA is actually baked into this game, and how IO Interactive plans to support it after launch. In short, this is literally everything you need to know about 007 First Light before you buy it.
His endgame is, we won't see it coming.
Before we continue, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. It would really help support the growth of my channel. Once again, thank you. So, here's the setup. We follow a young Royal Navy pilot named James Bond who ends up as the sole survivor of his team after their mission goes completely south. Left as the only person capable of rescuing hostages, Bond finds himself on MI6's radar and they walk him through completing the assignment. There's a fun detail here. This version of Bond's look is arguably the closest any adaptation has ever gotten to how his creator, Ian Fleming, originally envisioned the character. Fleming actually sketched out how he pictured his hero, and comparing the two side by side, you can see the resemblance. Even the scar from the sketch is there. So after the opening mission, MI6 spots the potential in this young soldier and recruits Bond. From there, players go through a training mission that doubles as a tutorial for the stealth and gadget systems, while also showing Bond earning his stripes before officially stepping into the field. Another parallel to Hitman where you similarly test your assassination skills in a simulated environment, party aboard a cruise liner. But the level design works differently from IO's previous game. Hitman is famous for dropping you into a large, multi-layered sandbox and letting you do whatever you want. Once the job is done, you walk out on your own terms. 007 First Light lives somewhere between linear design and open sandbox. You move through carefully directed cinematic set pieces, tightly scripted, no deviation. Then, once you push through the choke point of the linear section, the game opens up and gives you the same kind of freedom you'd get in Hitman. After completing the objective in the open section, you're funneled back into a scripted sequence that draws clear inspiration from the Uncharted series. In fact, a lot of people are comparing the linear portions of Bond to Uncharted in terms of scale and spectacle. It says a lot about how starved the genre has been that people are drawing that comparison to a game from 2016, but it's entirely earned. Uncharted 4 still has no real competition when it comes to the sheer quality of its execution. One of the 3 levels journalists and content creators got hands-on time with during the preview was the gala reception mission. The level gives you a remarkable range of approaches to a single objectives. Bond can eavesdrop on conversation, gather intel, impersonate other people, bluff his way past guards, and lift excess items for restricted areas. The game doesn't push you toward a single correct answer. If you beeline for the first available route, you'll miss side interactions, optional dialogue, and entirely different ways to tackle the objective. The game introduces a brand new social stealth mechanic called bluff. you have the ability to talk your way past NPCs and smooth talk your way into places that are otherwise off limits.
Oi, I need to find Saunders. There's a chance the suspect is dressed as security. The bastard could be hiding right under your noses.
Damn. I'll keep an eye out for new faces.
A genuinely brilliant mechanic that fits Bond's character like a glove. That said, it has its limits. Some NPCs on a given level are harder to fool than others. To pull it off successfully, you'll need to collect a resource marked with a lightning bolt icon, earned by neutralizing enemies. Eavesdropping on character conversations around the level opens up new routes to your objective you'd never have known about. You might overhear a PR manager call and introduce yourself as someone else, so she walks you straight through security. Or you find a press pass and a camera on the map, pose as a journalist, and stroll right past the guards. And since we've already touched on Bond's watch, let's take a closer look at it. The Q-Watch is primarily a distraction tool, though it's capable of quite a bit more. Besides the lightning bolt resource, there are two other elements: batteries and chemicals. To charge those, you'll need to find resources scattered around the level. The watch can blind enemies with a laser, trigger nausea to clear a path, or steal a keycard. You can also manipulate the environment, bring down a chandelier with a laser, open locked doors, or even take control of a plane Bond happens to be aboard. Beyond the watch, Bond will also have wireless earbuds for communication and listening in on targets. We also got a brief glimpse of a camera in Bond's toolkit, one that takes truly jaw-dropping shots. There are plenty more gadgets we haven't seen yet in action. On top of those, Agent 007 will have access to a fleet of Aston Martins spanning different models and eras, all kitted out with things like mounted machine guns. And also a bike with, well, a completely unhinged nitro system apparently. And beyond your personal gadgets, the environment itself is full of objects you can use to draw or redirect enemy attention. The standout feature of the game is the hand-to-hand combat. Bond can punch, dodge, parry, grab enemies, drag and slam them into the environment, or hurl environmental objects at them, knock enemies into each other, chain finishing moves, body check opponents, and launch attacks while vaulting over cover. Bottles, crates, railings, walls, everything in the room becomes part of a fight. Watching it all play out makes you want to charge into a level just to start brawls Sifu style. The gunplay promises to work seamlessly alongside the melee combat. There is a rule in the game though: you can't open fire until an enemy shoots at you first. Once they do, you've got your license to kill. Beyond lethal takedowns, you can disable enemies by shooting them in the limbs, grab their weapon mid-tussle, and when you run dry on ammo, just chuck the gun at them and finish the job with the takedown. Between missions, you're free to roam the MI6 base and meet new characters. The Q Lab, down on the lower level, is where you select your loadout before deploying on the next assignment. Whether there'll be any limit on how many gadgets you can carry remains to be seen at launch. What we do know is that story-wise, you won't have everything from the start. Gadgets unlock gradually as you progress. If you want to replay missions with the full toolkit at your disposal, that's where the tactical simulator comes in. The Tech Sim lets you run specific missions with added challenge conditions, and completing them will put you on a leaderboard for top performers. Tech Sim runs also unlock new gadget types and variants, plus upgrades for existing gear. Bond does have a wardrobe, but it's Tech Sim exclusive, meaning you can't wear the skeleton suit in the main campaign. At least for now, the developers have no plans to add that option, say through New Game Plus. That said, they're committed to continuously adding fresh content to the Tech Sim, and to quote them directly, the game's release at IO Interactive is just the beginning of the journey. The big question is how exactly post-launch support will be structured. Will IO Interactive build entirely new levels, or simply slot new objectives into existing maps? In Hitman, that approach works like a charm. The game is designed around self-contained sandbox locations where the sandbox experience stands above the narrative. Drop in, eliminate targets, walk out. An endlessly replayable loop. 007 First Light is a different beast. The cinematic presentation, the choreographed action sequences, and the linear narrative make organic seasonal content integration significantly harder to pull off. Hitman's Freelancer mode can reuse maps so naturally because those locations aren't anchored to rigid story structure. Bond, on the other hand, risks feeling contrived if the sandbox segments aren't cleanly separated from the linear narrative choke points with surgical precision. My best guess is there are two realistic paths forward. Scenario 1, IO Interactive keeps releasing full, standalone James Bond games roughly every 3 years. Big graphical leaps probably won't happen between entries, but Bond himself evolves. He ages, gains experience, and carries the weight of his history in scars both physical and personal. Each new game builds on the last, essentially being everything its predecessor was, only bigger and better. Scenario 2. The studio ditches traditional sequels entirely and turns James Bond into a live service platform built on seasonal updates. No 007 Second Light, instead annual seasons rolling in new missions, targets, gadgets, and locations. Essentially, IO Interactive takes everything they learned building Hitman World of Assassination as a content platform and applies that same model to Bond. And last but not least, IO Interactive's own road to get here deserves real recognition. Around the time the first two games in the Hitman reboot launched, the studio was going through serious financial hardship. They were on the brink of shutting down under Square Enix, and later Hitman 2 under Warner Bros. Also missed its financial targets. After buying themselves back, the studio went fully independent, self-published Hitman 3 and eventually merged all three entries into Hitman World of Assassination, a move that finally put them on solid financial footing. Now IO Interactive is working alongside Amazon on Bond project, and the studio looks like it's in a much healthier place overall. Here's hoping 007 First Light lands well enough to give them the runway to fully support the game long term, because the support is clearly part of the plan. The only open question is what shape it takes. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Make sure to subscribe and drop a like. See you in the next one.